Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dollar Auction Show. This time, Alex and I are in person. How are you, Alex?
Are you a real boy?
I am a real boy.
This is perfect. I'm good. How are you?
Very good, very good. Lots is happening in the markets.
Are we pumping or
What
are we
would
dumping?
you like to start with? Okay, let's start with the general state of Bitcoin versus the rest of the market. So as of today, the stocks are all-time high in terms of QQQ at least. Gold is pretty close to all-time high. Silver is pretty close to all-time high.
Bitcoin, not so much.
Bitcoin, not so much.
Not so
We're
much.
still, 30% below the all-time high?
We're what, 91
91.
and a half? So whatever, 126, 91? Yeah, about
Yeah.
30%.
So what do you think of that, Alex?
It sucks. We were just talking about this at lunch. I don't love it. You're much more patient. I'm also patient-ish. But we talked about a bad scenario would be if stocks pump, then dump, and Bitcoin dumps, and then stocks pump and Bitcoin doesn't. We're talking also something broke on October 10th, obviously and clearly, and unsure what it is, and it needs to be taken out of the market. There are all these articles about no new inflows. I don't know if they're inflows. There are all these macro news, Clarity Act will pass, and this will pass, and advisors will start advising, and Morgan Stanley is filing for an ETF. And Morgan Stanley is creating a wallet. But I don't know. At some point, we need to start getting some sort of price appreciation, I think. And it's really trying the patience of everyone. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, if I want to wear my pessimistic hat, it's definitely not something that anybody expected. So, we're kind of stuck flat year over year, and again in a year where everything else is pumping. So you would think that if liquidity is supposed to drive Bitcoin, there's clearly, I know people are split on liquidity, but like the fact that stocks are all-time high, it means that the money is going there and not on Bitcoin. But that being said, we're still really, really good. Like, I'm looking at the power law. And the power law, I think, did you read the book or did you see the Jeffrey West's book that he references? So it's really interesting. So basically, the power law is based on a book by Jeffrey West called Scale. I really recommend it. And it talks about how cities scale, how companies scale. And, if I had to do the TLDR of the book, companies go exponential, and that's why they die. That's why they cannot live forever. Same with currencies, right? If you look at debt, it goes exponential, and that's why currencies fail every 200 years or so. But he looks at cities, and he says cities literally exist for thousands of years. Like, you have like cities like Jerusalem, like, Rome, like that, since the founding of the city, it's just growing and growing and growing, and it doesn't die. And the reason it doesn't die is basically two reasons. One is that it's not exponential, but it's like the power curve, right? Which basically means that like it takes much longer to reach every next step of development. Like, if you think of a city, right, like New York, right, like it takes it much longer to double now from 10 million to 20 million people than it took it to go from 5 million to 10 million. And in the book, he goes like really deeply into those reasons. The main kind of TLDR of the book is that those things are very stable long term, even though they're unstable short term. Like, you could never predict the size of a city very short term, but you could very, very accurately predict the size of a city 200 years into the future. And it's not just the size of a city. He has like the number of patents issued from people in the city, number of gas stations in the city. So there's a bunch of things that grow in the same rate. So that's kind of my optimistic view, which is like Bitcoin is what is driving the growth beyond like hedge funds exploding and leverage in this. It's more and more people putting money in Bitcoin. That's the fundamental. Like, people are taking fiat money and buying Bitcoin. And that is growing. And I think it will keep growing just because, like, again, we've said it many times, but many not recently, it is a better money. It is a better way to store energy. It's a better way to store monetary value than anything else out there. It's just that people don't know it yet. And also, when it's small, it's not better. It's only better once it's really big. So there's like this rocky thing where people say, oh, I should have put my money in gold. Gold is much better. But no, long-term, gold is much worse because gold grows at 2.5% per year, and Bitcoin grows at 0. So the only thing is to wait enough time. Yes, the supply grows. So we just have to wait enough time so people realize it. And I don't know if it can be accelerated, like the rate at which people realize.
You guys heard it here first. Shimon dropping pure alpha. In the year 2226, Bitcoin will be higher.
Yeah, but that's why I think the power law works. That overall, if you neutralize like all the volatility, you can count on it that it grows. Just like you can count on that New York will be bigger like
Yeah, but
in
look,
50 years.
for sure.
Unless Mamdani like gets his way.
Oh boy.
But that's a different
No, or the right topic of conversation. We should actually talk about geopolitics. There's so many things that have happened today. Today we're recording the 9th, Friday, January 9th. I do want to come back to geopolitics. Look, I agree with you. It's just it's painful and it's brutal, and it also sucks that still the Democrats by and large are against it. And in my job, Harris well, I mean, I'm seeing this in the data. We're actually going to present to one of the funds in the space next week. Seeing this in the data, Democrats still, and even slightly worse in some instances than 2024, are just against this industry. And so, I kind of want to pivot a little because we always talk about Bitcoin, but away into geopolitics. And if you listen to our podcast, we always talked about how this is going to be a social strife era. No, I think it's going to resolve itself in maybe 10 years, but it's really bad now. I mean, with what happened in Minnesota, with Iran, with Venezuela, it's social strife and people getting entrenched into their positions. And even if something is objectively better, it feels like we're in this post-truth era. Like Iran to me was very hurtful. There was a headline by Sky News. First of all, no mainstream news media is actually covering this, which is it's just an absolute
Except in
travesty.
Israel, it's all over the mainstream news.
Well, yeah, Israel makes
Joking,
sense.
but it's true. In Israel, that's all they're talking about in like, every news,
Yeah, for sure.
Every hour.
But the fall. So I don't know for those listeners that maybe let's just take a step back, right? So Iran in 1979 was taken over by communists and Islamists. It's always this left plus Islamist coalition. Since then, they took what was the Paris of first of all, going back even further, Iranians are Persian. Persians and Arabs always fought. Persians are actually non-Muslim. Introducing Islam to Iran is a fairly foreign thing. Now there's minorities that are Muslim, but overall Persians aren't. Then Persians and Arabs always fought. Then the Islamic Revolution comes, and a minority, but a good-sized minority, takes over. And since then, women have to wear hijabs. They can't, it's very much kind of Sharia law, as closely against the Sharia law. And millions of people are persecuted. If you talk to the Iranian diaspora in the States, in Europe, and so on, they all are absolutely opposed to the regime. And the regime it's extremely brutal regime that exerts its influence, or has exerted its influence through in the world and in the Middle East through kind of two main things. And Shimon, you correct me if I'm wrong because you're the expert here, but one, going after nuclear weapons, okay, and two, through terror proxies, namely Hezbollah, which was the biggest terror proxy in the world until Israel, and Hamas. Now, there are other Muslim Brotherhood that's now rampant in Europe, and so on and so forth. So because of the Hamas attacks on Israel, and Israel wiping out Hezbollah, and then Israel essentially wiping out Hamas, and then Israel bombing and taking out the air defenses, and then the U.S. coming out to be two bombers, Spear bombers, are bombing the nuclear facilities, the regime in Iran has finally been weakened enough. Couple that with the collapse of the currency, which is, by the way, why Bitcoin. People came out on the streets to mainly protest the central bank and the collapse of the currencies, but now it's been picking up steam. The son of the former Shah of Iran, Reza, I don't want to butcher his last name, I forgot. Pahlavi. Reza Pahlavi is coming out 4 days ago and said in 2 days, which was yesterday, everyone at 8 o'clock p.m. go out on the streets. Even more people came out on the streets, so it was a test to see if people would listen to him. There are millions of people on the streets. Some cities have taken away from the regime. The regime today cut off all internet and so on and so forth. All this is to bring us to today, okay? And so the fact that the Western media isn't covering an uprising of brutalized people against a brutal regime, a tyrannical regime that not only brutalizes its people, but the whole world through its terror proxies, is an absolute disgusting travesty in my mind. And then Sky News in the UK comes up with a headline that says, Israeli and U.S. and Israeli terrorists sparking violent clashes or something along those lines, according to the regime in Iran. This is the headline that it's Israeli terrorists, when it's actually, even if I'm sure the Israeli intelligence and U.S. intelligence are operating, but um, the people are rising up. It's actually completely organic. And there are millions of people in the street, the bravest people in the world, because they will be shot. Many people will lose their lives. And this is the way they're covering it, is a travesty among all travesties and a complete continuing brainwashing of this. I don't think they can figure it out, because this whole oppressor oppressed thing, there are no white people. It's, brown Islamists are getting pushed out by brown Persians. And so it's like, it doesn't fit the modern left narrative of who's oppressed and oppressed. Anyway, oppressor and oppressed. I'm going to pause. I know you've been listening for a while. I just want to bring us all up to speed, but it really pains me, because freedom, people are fighting for their freedom, true freedom, to be able to walk in the street without a hijab, for example. Where are the feminists? Where are the left feminists? Where are all of these bullshit, like moral superiority, virtue signaling leftists in the West that are all for equal rights? This is equal. This is equal rights and freedom of millions of oppressed people in the world, and no one's out saying anything about it. But we'll tie back to economics. But I don't know. I'll pause.
Well, no, I completely agree with everything you said. I want to double click on the angle of the media. I mean, I heard a really interesting podcast that basically said, look, media today has nothing to do with media the way it was, because once upon a time, 100 years ago, the media they would have reporters on the ground, right? And they would report back what's happening. And then the newspaper would tell you what's happening and put a spin on it, right? But now, because there's no value in what happened, right? Since social media and stuff, all the news organizations would, by the way, I don't even want to call them journalists, it's content creators. Just think of a YouTube channel, like the BBC YouTube channel, New York Times YouTube channel, and they decide what to put on the channel. It's all speaking to the base, and it's all basically the documentary showed how the New York Times, when Trump won the first time, it was amazing for the newspaper, because they all hated him, but it's oh great, now we can rile up the base, and their profits increased. So I'm just looking at all the news as literally who's paying them, and that's what they're going to say. So if you think about it, okay, CBS, with Barry Weiss, pretty objective. If you look at New York Times, they covered Stalin's Ukraine massacre, Holodomor, and they knowingly covered it, and the guy won a Nobel. Covered up. And the guy knowingly, he won a Pulitzer Prize. His name was Walter Duranty. Why? Because the people who owned the New York Times were paid by the industrialists who wanted to do business with Russia. It was good business. It's you get cheap grain and you export your machines, and there's a lot of money to be made. So why rile up the public against? What good will happen to these industrialists if the New York Times published about the famine? Congress will pass an act that you don't trade with Russia. That's not good. Okay, so how do we prevent that? We just pay the New York Times through ads, through whatever. It's not illegal even. So when I'm thinking, okay, BBC, who's paying for the BBC? The British taxpayers. Who's leading the British taxpayers? Far left government, probably right, heavily influenced by Islamists. So are they going to be for toppling an Islamic regime or against toppling an Islamic regime? The New York Times, it's a little bit more I don't know. It's really an enigma to me why they're not covering it. Because it's interesting, it's newsworthy. At least cover it, at least put a spin. So it's really an enigma to me, things
But they're not covering it all. You scroll through the pages.
Yeah, it's clearly suppressed.
Yeah.
Clearly. Because again, in Israel, of course, Israel is probably, Saudi Arabia, it probably opens every hour the news, right? But why wouldn't you cover it? Is the U.S. press? So I guess they probably want the status quo to continue. I know that the liberals, so the whole Obama doctrine, and this was a podcast, I should link it. Mike Pompeo, after he finished, he went on a Israeli podcast, the deepest Israeli podcast. They interview Netanyahu and stuff. And so he basically said like the biggest difference between the Democrats and the Republicans in terms of Middle East policy is that the Republicans believe, and by the way, he said, look, this is not biased. Like you could say that the Democrats are right. It's not objectively who's right, but the Democrats believe that Iran is a force that balances the region because it causes everybody to kind of stay in check. Otherwise, if you suppress Iran, Saudi Arabia will become too powerful, and then Iran will really, really hate us, and then they will really, really be terrorists. They always have this thing of like Hamas, right? If you piss them off too much, then they'll really want. But it's like, okay, they did October 7th. Like, what else are they gonna do? But anyway, that's what the Democrats believe. That's why they wanted the nuclear deal with Iran. They just wanted to keep the status quo and not rile up. And they always give the reason, which is like Iraq. Look, Saddam was a bad guy. We took him out. It destabilized the region, like objectively, right? After 2004, the Middle East is way, way, way less stable than before 2000. Sure. But what do the Republicans say? They say, no, objectively, right? Iran is an anti-US force. It's an anti-American, anti-Western force. They say that they want to kill us. They say that they want to destroy us. Therefore, we got to take him down as much as we can. And that's it. And that's the policy. And then everything else comes from that policy, right? And it's very much like, the left believes in equality, the right believes in justice. If you go deep into the roots, it makes sense to me, actually. Same with Venezuela. Why don't they want to intervene? Like, just think about it, right? So what happened in Venezuela is they captured Maduro. The U.S. captured Maduro, killed a bunch of his bodyguards. Like half of them were Cuban, half of them were Venezuelan. No civilians, or maybe 2 civilians were killed. And now they're prosecuting Maduro, right?
Not killing him, prosecuting.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
What do the protests say? Hands off Venezuela. We don't need more wars. We don't need regime change. And then people are like, well, it wasn't exactly a regime change. It's more like a pressure to the current regime to do the stuff that the US wants them to do, which is brilliant in my opinion, right? It's just like with China. You don't want to change the regime in China. You just want them to be friendly towards you and to do policies that benefit both. So it's like, how could you be against it? Oh, because he didn't follow procedure.
Yeah,
because it's not fair. It's not fair that you can just go into another country and kidnap. It's all about these like sentimental values that have nothing to do with practical, realpolitik. And you have to like decide, who has influence where. It's clear now the world is going into a multipolar state, which means that the US can't spread itself too thin because then they won't be able to control anywhere. So they said, okay, we're going to focus on the US, strong alliance with Europe, and we'll put all of our resources there, kick out all the anti-American elements from there, and that's the policy. And I like that policy.
Strong alliance with Europe or Latin America?
No, Latin America is not an alliance. It's vassal states.
Yeah,
Europe, there's an alliance.
Yeah, I think there's an alliance with Europe, there's an alliance with the Middle East, and namely Saudi Arabia, UAE, and so on.
Exactly.
And then the sphere of influence is kicking out Russia and China. The Venezuela thing is interesting because, again, millions of Venezuelans are crying in the streets from happiness, saying thank you, Donald Trump, for getting rid of a dictator. And we're and we are messing around with procedure. And so, there's arguments of like, well, no one country should be able to go and do this. Okay, well, there is a country that can do this. And the world is what it is. You have the strong and you have the weak. If you want to be strong, then go figure out how to be strong. Ally yourself and so on. I would rather live under U.S. influence and under Western values, not under Russian, which I lived under Soviet values, as did you, or Chinese values. I don't want that. I don't want communism. I don't want to be repressed. I want freedom of speech and so on and so on. So yes, the U.S., by the way, Biden put a bounty on Maduro's head. Trump increased that bounty. Why have a bounty of $50 million if you're not going to go and take this person out? What were we supposed to do? Go through the UN and have more circle jerk for more years until what? Europe is completely impotent, by the way. Literally cannot do anything. Mm-hmm. Like they are sitting there and creating resolutions and threatening folks. And Europe has declined so much. They've wasted every goodwill or military goodwill that they've had. And what the Russia-Ukraine war, by the way, showed is that Europe is also paper tiger. Like they can't really do anything. By the time they figure something out, they're nothing. It's the U.S. and then after that, U.S. is China. And Trump's move, by the way, Maduro was brilliant. Surgical strike, take out a dictator, bring him in to power, show to Russia and China that not only are we not messing around, but we can go in and do something that they cannot.
Mm-hmm.
And in the world of where people are figuring out how to prevent, we want to prevent death, right? We want to prevent killing. And there's potentially a big Chinese invasion of Taiwan, which has geopolitical implications, chip manufacturing implications. There's a lot of tied into this. But even outside of that, let's just say they're going to go into Taiwan and people will die. To prevent people dying, you have to show force. It's deterrence. It's not appeasement. Appeasement under Obama, I voted for Obama, I voted for Biden. I now realize those things were wrong. I mean, Obama's appeasement strategy never worked. It doesn't work. What you want is a strong country that's a bully, that's us, but the best bully in the block, which is us. Not to say the U.S. is innocent. I've also heard arguments of like, well, no country should be able to do this. There should be international law. You shouldn't be able to go and just take a dictator out, even if they're oppressing the people. I can see the logic in that argument, but that's just not how it works. It's like saying communism. Well, it should be for everyone, or Marxism, I guess, technically not communism. Like we should give to each other. Yeah, we should be kind to each other. It's unfortunately not the way the world works. There is these dreams of what it should be, and then there's reality. Because Russia and China aren't playing by those rules. Maduro, who's a narco trafficker and imprisoning and killing his own people, is not playing by those rules. So by the same token, when we say, well, we shouldn't do this and there should be a different procedure, well, Maduro shouldn't have killed people. He shouldn't have become a dictator. 86% of Venezuela, 86% is under the poverty line. 86%.
Yeah, no, these people, they're not serious people. I mean, I've actually, you shouldn't do it. It's just like with Hamas, right? People say like, okay, you shouldn't kill civilians. Okay. How do you fight a war? Let's say, forget about October 7th, right? Let's say a cartel in Mexico now, or forget about Mexico. Let's say the US disregards human rights. Let's say according to the critics of the US, of course, I don't think the US disregards human rights, but let's say one country on the border, the enemy country builds a bunch of tunnels and starts like shooting and kidnapping people, right? While hiding behind civilians. How are you supposed to react to that? Right? It happened in Israel, but it can happen in another place.
Yeah.
So like, people are not serious when they say like, oh, you can't kill civilians. No, like the rules of war are very simple, which is like there has to be a proportionality between how many civilians you kill and the value of the target, or like the reduction in violence that you get from killing that target, right? So it's like, yeah, you can't kill, like if it's someone very, very low level as a terrorist and you drop a bomb on him and kill 200 civilians, that's a war crime. Like you go to prison for that. But that's why before they drop every bomb, they have a legal team that checks what's the collateral damage, what's the value of the target, and they approve it or not.
Yeah.
So like, I think, first of all, Israel played it masterfully with Gaza. Second of all, I think the US played it masterfully with Venezuela. The idea is like, how do you apply the minimum amount of force to achieve like your goal?
Yeah.
And so that's I think how you should measure someone. Did you apply too much force to achieve your goal? Okay, you should be criticized. But like, I think the brilliance of Trump, both with Soleimani and with Maduro, and now what he's doing with like Iran, I'm sure he's supporting them. He applies the minimum amount of force.
But he does it in a way that signals exactly what can come.
Exactly. And what's amazing about October 7th, like, I don't know how it was planned or was it a conspiracy or not, but like Israel played its cards really masterfully, because what they did, and I want to say this here on the podcast because we've said bits and pieces of it, but never the full story. So when you're strong in a conflict, there's something that's called escalation dominance. So basically the idea is like the stronger party, if they play their cards right, they always should escalate on their terms. Okay. So what Israel did, the first escalation was they hit an Iranian general in Damascus. Okay. That was in the consulate of Iran, but in a building next to the consulate. So according to international law, like if you don't hit the consulate, it's not technically an act of war. So Israel basically declared war on Iran without declaring a war on Iran. And then Iran was like, oh, what are we going to do? We have to react, right? If we don't react, then they just kill one of our generals. And this is because they organized October 7th And when they did this, Nasrallah was still alive, and they were actively shooting missiles from Lebanon, like Iranian missiles were raining on Israel while they did. So then Iran is like, okay, we'll shoot 100 missiles at Israel. And now it came out. They're like, we know that the air defenses, the capability is 100 missiles. So anything above 100 will actually kill people, which is what happened in the 12th Day War. But we'll shoot only 100. And they thought they were very smart. So they shot 100 missiles. There was a crazy night of sirens. Nobody died. One Palestinian died, actually. It was so sad. It's like a fragment of the missile just fell on his head. But anyway, so then Iran was like, oh, we showed them. And then Israel, what they did is, instead of retaliating by like some crazy amount of bombs, they just did one bomb that destroyed one radar station in an anti-air missile system. But basically what they showed is like, we can destroy your air defenses. That's escalation. And then Iran is like, oh, what are we going to do? Then the 12th Day War, Israel started it, wiped out a bunch of generals, wiped out a bunch of nuclear scientists, wiped out all their air defenses. And so then people are like, wait, this whole regime, and that's why they have protests now. They're like, this whole regime, you have Israeli planes circling overhead,
Yeah.
which means they're not strong. They're not able to defend themselves, right? And now we'll see what happens. But if the regime topples, I will say, hats off to how they played the cards,
Sure.
from October 7th to toppling the regime. Even if they don't topple the regime, it sends a crazy message. Both this and Venezuela sends a message. All the Chinese and Russian air defenses
Bullshit.
are bullshit versus US technology, which is an amazing thing and very, very much deterrent. And like, it's one thing to do it with Venezuela, but it's another thing to do it with Iran, because in Venezuela, they disabled it in a very small area of the country. In Iran, they disabled it in the entire country. So it shows China, look, we can do this shit. So I think it's really good. I think everything you said, that the world is not heading in the right direction. I actually think geopolitically it's heading in a very healthy direction.
I know. I'm saying there's a lot of social strife. I agree. I think it's heading in the. I think the world is healing. We need this. We need this to culminate, especially the right versus left. Like Barry Weiss taking over CBS News in the U.S. is a good thing. Just giving the news. Hopefully, more things will come out. Elon with X, XAI versus all the other
Grokpedia versus Wikipedia.
Wikipedia versus exactly. There's all these articles. I mean, many of our viewers may not know this. By the way, the best source of truth is X. Go to Twitter X. There's a lot of shit out there. There's a lot of garbage. But if you follow the right people, all the world's politicians, the top people in the world of every company, and all politicians primarily talk on that medium. And so you can get news on the ground. You figure out who to follow, what's bullshit, what's fake and not. And in each clip, you have a little Grok icon. You can click and you see if it's real or not. The AI will tell you. It can find sources. But though it came out, Wikipedia only took sources from the left, only left-leaning publications. The right-leaning, Breitbart, whatever you think about Breitbart or Newsmax or Fox News or others. Fox News, forget Newsmax and Breitbart, who were very right-wing. But Fox News is center-right, okay, as a news organization. You don't take Fox News as, but you take like, what's the really left-leaning one? It was just on top of my mind. It's like Mother Jones and I forgot the other one. Those are Huffington Post. Like Huffington Post and Newsmax is probably the same thing. Like one on the left, one on the right. So you can't take one and then not take the other. You either take none or you take both. And then so Wikipedia became really biased. I would rely on it a lot. And then until I started digging into the stuff on X, I didn't realize how deep the rod is. And the rod is deep. And then to your point, if Venezuela, masterstroke, I think. Again, it's all about also showcasing U.S. power, projecting it. I think the other masterstroke, if Iran falls, and Iran is hard, and you talked about this, you should give the listeners your opinion about kind of why Iran is different, because I think it's very nuanced and people don't know about this, about the minority and how big they are and so on. But if Iran falls, it's a cascade of peace in the Middle East. The irony, though, is that the radical Islamists are pushed out and into where? The West, into the UK, into France, into the US. Today, the UAE came out and they said they're stopping funding their own citizens going to the UK to study because they're going to come back radicalized. Like that, the UAE, a Muslim Arab country, but who 10 years ago, by the way, was talking about how all the radicals are going to come out from the West. no longer wants to send students to the UK so they don't come back radicalized from the Muslim Brotherhood. It's just like, where have we gotten? The nation of King Arthur, the nation of lions, the United Kingdom of deep Christianity. Where has that nation sunk to? It's embarrassing. Like, if you're listening and you're in the UK, I feel for you. But the UK is an embarrassment, and Europe is even big. Like France, I look at France and Macron and all these little it's a mockery of the great storyline of Europe.
Well, France never had a great storyline, but yeah, the UK, it's pretty sad. There's a joke that basically says, look, Iran must be prevented from having nuclear weapons, and thank God that the only country that is Muslim and has nuclear weapons is Pakistan, and is they're responsible. But the problem is the next Muslim country that will have nuclear weapons will also be able to launch them from a submarine, because it's going to be the UK.
Yeah,
so it's like,
it's so true.
Oh man! But listen, the crazy thing though, I'm trying to think of humanity 500 years in the future. I have no problem with Islam. Like, anyone who has been to Dubai can see that Islam as a religion is absolutely. I went to Thailand. I had a motorcycle accident in the island of Koh Lanta. They're all Muslims. This 16-year-old girl with a hijab was changing my stitches, and it's it's a beautiful religion. The problem is the radical Islam. Just like radical Christianity did the Crusades and the Inquisition, right? Very bad.
The first one was arguably not. I mean, they killed a lot of people. But the first one was pushing back against the Muslims at that point. The second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, all those, they were.
Christianity is the Inquisition, and then you can take any religion and say that they're crazy if they're extreme. But I really hope that, this thing with Iran, I mean, it's such an unstable thing. That's the one thing we have going for us. I actually heard a really interesting analysis that basically said, look, the communism in the USSR, it's why did the USSR collapse but China did not collapse? It's not about the collapse of the country, it's about the collapse of the system. The system was communist in the USSR. And in China, they were genius. That Deng Xiaoping basically built modern China by saying, no, we're not going to do what Mao says. We're going to become capitalist. And so, yeah, they kept their integrity as a government, but the meme of communism fell. So I hope that the meme of radical Islam will fall. We'll just be like, look, it's not practical. Just like the meme of Nazism, right, fell. You can still be a neo-Nazi, but you don't have an army, you don't have a country, you don't have GDP. So that's what my hope is, and we're definitely heading in this direction. And communism in the US is completely being eradicated in all of the American, sorry, not the US, the American continent. We're just left with Cuba. But
I'm really, I've said this before, and in Washington D.C., this is a terribly unpopular opinion. I think Trump is going to go down as one of the greatest presidents this country has ever had. In terms of consequential actions that have reshaped the world. He's for sure. There's a grifter, and he's a jerk. He's an asshole. There's all of the things. He's not a pleasant human being, although he's supposed to be very funny and and present whatever. And what's the term for it when you're very likable?
Yeah.
In person, but consequential. Maduro, the Armenia-Azerbaijan war, many wars that he kind of stopped. If preventing China from going to Taiwan to be seen, hopefully falling of Iran, that a lot goes. That if that happens, goes to him. By the way, if Iran falls, and here's another aspect of Venezuela and Iran and how it all ties in together. I mean, it's all complex and ties together. Iran produces heavy crude. Heavy crude is mostly refined in the U.S. anyway. So this whole thing we're doing it for oil is a complete bullshit argument, because Maduro gave all of the oil up to the U.S. He said, I'll stop giving it to Russia and China that are stealing it from the people now, and I'll give it to the U.S. That was the offer on the table. Just don't kidnap me or whatever. Don't take me. Let me stay in power. And then Trump said no. He still took Maduro. So the oil going to the U.S. was on the table regardless. That's moot. Second of all, Venezuela needs the U.S. to refine at scale. They're only running at 20% capacity. You want to run at 100% capacity, Russia and China aren't taking it, you need to take it to the US to refine it. We have Louisiana and Texas have, I think, I forgot the statistics, 6 of the 7 or 5 of the 6, but the point is the biggest
Most,
refineries,
yeah,
most of the
vast
refineries are
majority.
there, exactly. And right now people aren't getting the oil. Who's getting it? Russia and China. So what's Trump doing? Russia's funding the war with Ukraine based on oil production. China's securing their natural resources through Venezuela. They're destabilizing Venezuela by pushing in Hezbollah and other terror groups and supporting those. So that destabilizes the region, plus narco trafficking. So taking their oil and moving into the US removes a source of income, a source of influence for China, and a source of income for Russia. And if you sell the oil on the market, what Trump said he would, market prices, it drops the price of oil, which drops Russia's ability to continue to wage war in Ukraine, therefore tying up the war in Ukraine. Because Trump offered, he's leaning on Zelensky, which I don't love, but he's leaning on him a lot. He doesn't have a lot on Putin. He can't manipulate. He can't say, "Oh, oil prices magically go down." It doesn't work like that. There's a market. So how do you do it? You flood it with supply. Okay,
Mhm.
this is what we're doing with supply, and so it has these massive ripple effects. So Iran falls and Venezuela falls. You have peace in the Middle East: Saudi Arabia, UAE, Israel, Jordan, call Egypt. Okay, Turkey then will be in a little isolated. Turkey's a bit of a problem child. You have you have Russia and Ukraine. Russia under massive pressure now to continue fighting the war in Ukraine. China, if the Russia-Ukraine war stops, China is under massive pressure because then all eyes are on China and Taiwan. Now the whole world is watching China and Taiwan with a strong US. So we're actually stopping a lot, or these moves, if they work, and hopefully they do, but they're definitely the right moves to do. Like if they don't work, it's not because the move was wrong. It's because you have a whole series of steps that need to happen. But these moves are setting us up, by the way, for a more peaceful world. Now I'll say one thing and I'll pause. Marco, if you this is the problem with listening to the media, okay, and listening to these stupid narratives about US and war in Venezuela and regime change. Listen to the people that are actually doing this. Marco Rubio came out and said, hey, there are all these reports that Trump wanted to or not wanted to, but they were considering endorsing Maria Machado, which is the Nobel Prize winner, and her, I forgot the other gentleman's name, who are going to be the potential the party to win. Well, they won the elections actually in Venezuela. They assess that she actually doesn't. She has a lot of support, but she's not strong enough to create a government. And had they removed the entire government, then it would be a state with no government. So what did they do? They said, behind the scenes, these are our demands. You will do everything we want you to do because we will not let your oil out. They've been stopping through the third Russian ship was stopped today, right? Now they're not letting the oil go out. And in the meantime, they're saying we need all of these things to happen. So what happened today? They released hundreds of political prisoners, including the president, the guy who Maria's kind of running mate, who won the election. He's freed from prison for the first time in over a year. And they released hundreds of political prisoners. Wow, who did this? Not the Europe with their letters and their stern statements. Trump did this, and the U.S. did it. So are we going to argue process that he went after and kidnapped a kind of a dictator where millions of people are crying in the streets saying "Thank you, Trump"? Or are we going to judge results that frees people, that pushes China and Russia out of our sphere of influence, that puts pressure on the Russian war with Ukraine, that can potentially end that war, that gives deterrence to China going into Taiwan, that releases political prisoners, that keeps the same system of government without doing the regime change in Venezuela, and then is going to push them to do elections and then uphold those elections? So to be seen what happens in Venezuela. But the path is exactly the right path. It's not actually getting involved in a country change or a regime change in the region.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, and I just want to say that the brilliance of Trump, I think, is because he's an outsider. All of the elite in the policy circles are very much, they've grown thinking the same, and that's why he comes with fresh ideas, and they suddenly work because, like, not only do the establishment, the policymakers in the establishment think in a certain way, but also like the adversaries think of how to react to that
Yeah.
specific way, right? So like they're not planning for what Trump did because they're probably planning. I saw a video in Venezuela. Maduro a couple of weeks ago was distributing like AK-47s to like people in neighborhoods, and it's like they didn't think that they'll just decapitate like him, but like leave the army in charge and control the country via the blockade. Like they didn't think of that. And then it's so crazy with the traditional media. I understand that they have to do it for clickbait, but like there was this like crazy Stephanopoulos is interviewing Marco Rubio, and he says, why did you only kidnap Maduro? Why didn't you kidnap more people? And he's like, well, what are you? We have limited army resources. Like, are you saying that we should have like jeopardizes the success of kidnapping Maduro just in case we can kidnap more people? And then Stephanopoulos is like, okay, you say that you rule Venezuela now. Like, how do you rule it? How do you enforce? By what authority do you tell the Venezuelan government what to do? And Marco Rubio is like, by the blockade. We basically said, we will not let you sell your oil unless you do what we tell you. And he's like, yeah, but by what authority? What gives you the authority to do it? And he's like, a blockade. And he's like, yeah, but what authorized the blockade? And he's like, a district court judge that said, this is sanctioned oil. You must stop these ships. It's a judge in New York, whatever. And Stephanopoulos can't even like they operate completely outside of the traditional way of doing things.
It's global. It's why we need a global discussion.
No, but it's like, what more do you need? If a judge says stop the ships and you have an army, it doesn't matter. But you have an army, you can enforce.
That's the thing.
The judge, right? How? Why does the judge get to kick me out of the house if I don't pay my mortgage? Because the dude comes with a gun and says, "Please, sir, you have to vacate." Like it always is about the guns. But the idea is they never used the guns before. That's the problem. Like the whole establishment before was very much left-leaning. Even in right-wing governments, there were left-leaning, like State Department and everything. And they basically think, let's not destabilize things. Let's not like ruffle too much the system because it's so chaotic. And it's like one spark here can lead to a forest fire there. It's like, okay, but then if you don't apply your force, then the bad guys are the only ones applying force. And I have to say, we probably have to not thank Putin, but like if Putin hadn't invaded Ukraine, like many of the, I don't think October 7th would have happened. I don't think like the whole war with Iran would have happened. Like so many things wouldn't have happened because Biden would have told, no, you don't go to war or whatever. Hamas would have been like, I think Russia supported them like to distract. I mean, there is evidence that Russia supported October 7th to distract resources from the war in Ukraine. So like my point is, they're the ones who did the spark, but then we have to decide how to react to it. And I'm kudos to this government. I'm very, very happy with how they're applying force. Yeah. They're applying it at the minimum amount of force to get the result done, but like completely unconventional. And even the tariffs, like I think that the genius of the tariffs wasn't about the economics of it, wasn't about the revenue, wasn't about anything. It was just about, this is one more lever, one more bit of leverage where we can force countries to do stuff. And nobody used it until now because it's like, oh, the economic state. Well, guess what? CPI data came out today. We're closing the trade. The trade balance is the best it's ever been in like 20 years or something. I posted it on X. I can retweet it. Yeah. No, my point is it created no inflation, which people said it will. It did create some extra revenue, and it advanced the geopolitical position of like we opened a bunch of factories for chips in the U.S. Like all of that wouldn't have happened.
And it's all in a crew. There was a great podcast called Moonshots. You know about this. Peter Diamandis does it. Did you listen to the one with Elon by chance?
Maybe bits of it.
So Elon had a great joke on it. I'm going to repeat it here. It's like two economists are walking in the forest, and one is they're walking and they walk upon an animal's piece of shit. One economist looks at the other one and goes, I give you $100 if you eat that piece of shit. He goes, okay. Takes a piece of shit, eats it, gets us $100. They're walking down, and there's another piece of shit. The first economist goes to the second one. Okay, now I'll give you $100 if you eat that piece of shit. And the guy goes, okay. Takes a piece of shit, gets us $100. They're walking, and then they're like, wait a second. We both kept our same money, but we just both ate. But we both ate two pieces of shit. And the first one goes, aha! But the economy is $200 richer. Yeah. So it's always a lot of economics is just mumbo jumbo with various numbers and data and these academic thoughts completely detached from reality of what's actually happening on the ground. And so you have these 70 or 80 whatever economists in the Fed with the dot plots and doing this and doing that and looking at past data. And look, God, I applaud economics and calculus and and high math, and it's all needed and it's very important. It'd be good for them to get some real world experience. We know people that work in some of these organizations, and great people, but they're very much very, when you spend your whole career in academia or in these settings and you haven't actually gone out and try to start a company, and try to employ people, try to actually deploy capital to get results, and then live and die both in terms of your position, your career, and the company's career, and other people's lives based on decisions you make on a micro level. You feel it. You have no idea. All of this is just having worked in finance. Well, Shimon and I can absolutely vouch that we can make any number, any projection, say whatever we want. You adjust some sensitivities here, adjust some sensitivities there. Anything can be anything. And a lot of economists out there, the people I used to look up to, Nobel Prize winners and this and that, and they're very smart and they're studied, but the elitism and the inability to be grounded in actual reality of how people live is just absolutely absurd.
Yeah, I mean, and the problem is like, even if you grant them the best intentions, it's a chaotic system. It's like we can't predict the weather like a month in advance. Like if now it's January 9th, no supercomputer can tell you exactly what the weather will be on February 9th.
Yeah.
And so why do people think that you can do it with the economy? It's like billions of people making decisions based on like, you change the interest rate, it changes so many things. And their models are known to fail, like, because, for example, they say that if you increase interest rates, it should lower unemployment. But then you had like times in the 70s where you had high inflation, high unemployment. It should have broken the model, but no, they kind of explain it away. So I think it's all not bullshit, but it's like not I'm not surprised when their predictions fail. And that's why I just wanted to say Bitcoin taught me that. And I think that's why Trump is really good, which is just like applying common sense that's unbiased with all the like baggage, like Alex, to your point, baggage of academia and stuff. And so what he does is he applies common sense. He has advisors that tell him, but he makes the final call based on common sense. And when you think about investing, Bitcoin, tech, those things are like just common sense. Like if you think 20 years from now, when you'll have robots manufacturing stuff, right? Do you think the NASDAQ will be like higher? Like forget about interest rates, forget about anything. So that's why I think we have an advantage in our investment stuff, that we basically zoom out. We have a view that's slightly different, like just like Trump has a view of applying force and applying tariffs, slightly different, but common sense, it kind of makes sense, right? Common sense, the economy should keep growing. We've been capping it because of too much regulation and too much, like, we're letting other people get away with too many things. So now we're fueling it. GDP is looking really good. And I think that's it. I think 2026 is going to be a good year, like overall. It could be, like people say, midterms years are very volatile. So, if you're trading, I don't trade, be very careful. But overall, I think the world is trending in the right direction, and the economy is trending in the right direction, at least in the US. Europe, yeah, it's a different story.
Europe is going to be for another episode of the podcast, but Europe, this is a really good one. I like it. We didn't talk a lot about Bitcoin, which we always do, but the geopolitics thing right now is extremely important to understand. We should do this live more.
Yes.
All right.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
Until next time.